All right, folks, this is Marco Palmera making sure the camera is set up right. And I want to talk with you about the problem that is happening in the industry when it comes to buying businesses, uh, rolling up companies, buying one small business, and so on and so forth. And I want to do that because I see a lot of people online talking about how easy it is to buy a business and basically selling a lot of common guys the dream of owning a company with little to no effort. And I think that is a dangerous behavior to sell people. And I understand why a lot of folks sell that because, of course, it's easy money for them. But it is important to be a little bit more aware of what's going on behind the curtains. And I'm going to be sharing with you that unspoken truth. So you can be a little bit more informed about what you're getting yourself into. If you want to buy businesses, you want to buy assets, you want to buy a company, you want to roll up a businesses and basically a, get into the acquisition arena. Now, who am I to do all that? Well, my name is Marco Palmero. My company, Ulysses, has helped entrepreneurs, search funds, private equity groups, strategic buyers, investment bankers, you name it, sourcing deals across the globe, different geographies, different markets, any type of deal that you can think of, we have sourced. I'm talking about small deals, 500K, 100 million in size, up to 50, 75 million, even 100 million in total value. And given the fact we are actively finding deals on behalf of people, on behalf of deal makers that are ultimately closing transactions, I want to share some thoughts and some ideas with some of you that might be wondering about this concept of buying a business, transitioning to entrepreneurship through an acquisition, the whole concept of entrepreneurship through acquisitions. And I think many, again, think that it is easy and that rolling up companies, so to speak, which means buying multiple businesses, putting them together, and then exit, is the best game in town. And they're not wrong, right? They're very right in thinking that that is a great opportunity. And so if you're thinking about that, and if you are considering this word as a place to start your own business or to grow your own personal wealth, you're certainly in the right place. But there are also some downsides and some things that you need to consider before you get yourself into this business. And again, many people don't talk about that because they like to sell a dream. And the dream and kind of like pot of gold that a lot of folks are trying to pitch you right now is that you don't need to have any money. You can buy a business with no money down, just get the SBA to finance 90% of it and find an investor to fund the rest 10%, and you're going to be on your way making millions of dollars in just a few months. Now, can that happen? Sure, yeah, it can happen. The probability of that happening, though, is significantly lower than folks online would make you think. And the reason for that is it is harder to first acquire business, let alone acquire without any of your own money. And there are a lot of steps that you need to go through before you can get to that point. And in most instances, these guys don't want to tell you about all these difficulties because it takes away from their pitch. And the pitch is you don't need to know much, just give me whatever the amount is to learn how to buy a business with no money down, and you're going to be on your way. You're going to be financially free. Now, that's a pretty compelling proposition, don't get me wrong. And I'm sure, if you're watching this video or if you watched some of these videos, that might have appealed to you too. The problem is, it's not necessarily true. And the first challenge that you might encounter as you go down that path is that, of course, it is becoming more and more difficult to get the business financed through SBA. Plus, finding an investor that will put 10% down without asking a strong equity contribution is not that easy. So there are a couple of things that are already kind of like shaky in that model. And the simple fact that people try to pitch you the idea of buying a business using that structure leads me to think that a lot of them are not that experienced about the acquisition arena at all. And a lot of them will try to prove you and kind of like show you the facts and basically how they bought their own businesses without maybe telling you the full story, right? They might tell you, I bought it with no money down, without mentioning that they put down a lot of collateral or a lot of other things that kind of like are going on behind the curtains without them actually disclosing all the facts. So what is the truth? What is it that you need to be aware of if you want to roll up companies, if you want to buy your first business? What is it that you need to be aware of? Well, first of all, that depending on where you are in the world, it might be easier or harder to buy a business in general. So there are certain environments where acquiring assets and acquiring businesses is not common practice. I'm thinking the Middle East, I'm thinking other markets that might not be the US or Europe. So if you are in those markets, it's going to be harder to buy businesses simply because people are less accustomed to that acquisition strategy, that kind of like entrepreneurship through acquisition model. And that is true especially for small assets. So I'm talking businesses 500K, a million, 2, 3, 4, 5 million. Instead, if you are in a market like the US, that is less of a problem because a lot of folks are selling businesses all day long. So even the business owners that you're going to approach are going to be more familiar with the idea of exiting their own company for money. So that's the first thing you need to take into consideration. What is it? Where is it that I'm operating? How hard it's going to be to kind of like bridge the gap of knowledge that there is from myself to the business owner that might not be savvy about the process. Then there's the point of, okay, now are there any businesses available in the industry sector or of the size that I want to buy a business? That is already a very tough question to answer. And again, when people talk to you about buying a business, they don't tell you that. I mean, they tell you, yeah, it's just easy, just pick a company and buy it, but it might not be the business that you want to buy. So before you actually get into the acquisition arena, you need to know a lot about the sector, the company, the type of asset that you want to own, and then you need to understand if there are enough opportunities available in that industry for you to actually conclude and close an acquisition successfully. Now, again, it might depend on the market you're in, the cycle you're in, and a lot of different things, but you need to have that understanding because what a lot of people don't tell you is that it's not that you're just going to find one deal and close that deal, because this is a game of probabilities. And so some deals that you might look at might get all the way to the finish line and then fall apart for whatever reason. And so you're going to need to go through a lot of them before you actually find a winner. And that's just part of the game. If you don't accept that, you're going to have a hard time. And I see people struggle with that a lot of times because they just find one deal, commit to it fully. They think that is going to be, a straight shoot, and then the deal falls apart. They're back to square one. They wasted 6 months of their time, and on and on and on. So first we need to understand, is the market big enough to accommodate options? So can I find enough deals that can give me a decent amount of opportunities to then filter through, so that out of the maybe 4, 5, 6 offers that I send out, one is going to materialize into a deal? That's the second step that you need to consider. Then the third step, and this is the most important one, is how do I find these deals? Because you see, this is probably the most difficult thing for you to do, especially if you're just starting out, especially if you don't know how to buy a business, especially if this is something that you're doing as brand new. Most people online will tell you, well, it's easy, just go on Biz Buy Sell, just go on the broker site, find a listing, and send an offer for that business. Yeah, but don't you think that maybe 100 other people are going to be doing exactly the same thing you're doing, and then maybe are going to be in a better financial position than you are? When you go to the table and you say, okay, I'm just going to finance the business 90% with SBA and 10% through an investor, They're going to say, okay, fine, SBA is going to take 120 days to get done, but I have another private equity here that offers me 20% less of what you're offering me, but it's all cash up front. Guess who's the buyer they're going to go with? Probably the private equity, right? So going on broker sites is certainly one way to originate deals, but it's not the gilded panacea. It's not the way that is going to enable you to have predictable deal flow and ultimately be successful at what you do. Because, again, very competitive environment. A lot of people are going to have a stronger proposition than you have unless you're loaded with cash. If that is the case, kudos to you. Just close this video and go buy your next business. But also, listed opportunities are not going to be the best opportunities that you can find for a variety of different reasons. First is, well, some of the deals, the premium deals that brokers get, actually get sold before they even list them, because brokers know what they're doing. Even investment bankers know what they're doing. They have a network of buyers. When they have a very hot deal, they're going to send it to these buyers first, preferential access. If these guys bite and they buy the deal, then they don't even have to list it. And so they made their money quickly. And most likely the best deals are going to go to these people because they can close quicker. The leftovers are going to go on a listing site. So if you're relying purely on listing sites to find your deals, chances are you're looking at leftovers, without considering that even out of these leftovers, the best opportunities are still going to go to the guys that have the stronger proposition. And if you're watching this video, you're trying to buy this business following the guide that gurus put online, you might be trying to buy it with a very complex solution like SBA and stuff, and therefore you're not going to have a very compelling proposition to a business owner. So finding deals is hard, and you cannot fully rely on brokers. You need to have a system to originate opportunities that are proprietary to you, because that gives you control over the assets that you're going to buy. It gives you exclusivity over the assets. It gives you a one-on-one relationship with a seller that you can leverage to close that deal in a much easier way, maybe on better terms, and without having other people stepping on your toes and messing up all the work that you did simply because they have a more compelling offer. If you build an off-market pipeline of deals, what you are going to have is prospects that are yours and that are going to want to move forward with you simply because you're the only option they're considering. You reached out to them directly. They're part of your funnel. They're not considering listing to a broker because they don't want to go through a bidding process. They want to deal with you. And so you have more control over the relationship. Now, once you have that, and that's saying a lot because, we source deals for people, and even big private equity groups and investment bankers do work with us for finding deals because they understand that's the most difficult thing to do. But once you have that, then there's still a lot of other steps that you need to take. Due diligence, analysis of the business, hiring financial and legal counsel, making sure these people do a good job, making sure nothing falls apart during the due diligence process, checking all the red flags, negotiating prices, closing the financing, and all these sorts of things. These are all steps that people don't talk to you about, or at least they don't mention right away when they try to sell you on the idea of buying a business, right? No, it's easy. Just get a finance agreement, SBA, 10% investors. It's going to be easy to close a deal. There are a lot of steps in between, and most people get overwhelmed by them as they step into this arena because they realize the promise people made to them was not actually real, or it was only partially true, and there's a lot of work involved. So the first thing that I believe you need to understand is that, yes, there is a strong and a big pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, but only if you're willing to create a system that you can control and own and that can give you predictable stream of deals. Why? Because again, we're dealing in a probability game, and if you don't have a lot of opportunities to choose from, you're going to end up being a loser because you're just going to commit to too little options, a limited amount of options, and you're not going to have enough to find that winner. Let's say it takes you 10 opportunities to find a winner. If you find only one opportunity every 6 months, it's going to take you 5 fucking years to buy the first business. right? So you need to be aware of that. Plus, I need to be aware that things can fall apart at all times. So we need to have options, proprietary deal flow, so that you can reduce the variance in kind of like how deals move through your funnel. How do you do that? Well, by reducing the control that people have over your process and creating a system that you own, so that you own the opportunities that are proprietary to you. You have a system to find more if needed, and ultimately you keep doing that over and over again, so you have enough deals, and then you can negotiate from a position of strength. Now, these people are talking to you about buying a business quick and easy. If we're talking about very tiny businesses, their idea might also be partially accurate. But the point I want to get across, and I want to kind of like make you understand, is that if you're planning to roll up businesses, so you just don't want to buy a laundromat and then run it. I mean, very few people are going to want to do that. I mean, come on. But if you want to buy a lot of businesses, maybe roll them up together, create continuity, create a system, create a portfolio of assets that you can sell for more money, then you got to think about this strategically. It's not just going to be a find a business, get it financed to SBA, repeat. That ain't gonna cut it. And if that if that opportunity appeals to you, chances are you're gonna have a lot of trouble in getting the first deal across, let alone the second, the third, and the fourth. However, if you understand that it is a little bit more complicated than that, and that you first need to have control over your system, then what I'm talking to you about will resonate a lot. And you will then understand why we are helping companies source deals, and why we help not only beginners but also experts in finding deals, because it is by far the most important thing you can have, a pipeline of deals that allows you to reduce variance and increase the probability that you're going to close one transaction. The promise itself is, I don't want to say far-fetched. It's like it's weird because it just shows you the final outcome, that it is achievable, by the way, but it doesn't show you all the steps that you need to take in order to get there. We are taking care of a lot of these steps on behalf of people, if that gives you comfort. So a lot of people come to us after they get sold this idea, this false idea, and then they say, well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. How can I solve these problems? They come to us, we help them out in building up the system, and then it becomes much easier for them to get to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The problem is people realize that too late. Sometimes they waste 1, 2, 3 years doing things the conventional way, so to speak, trying to kind of like find the magic trick or the secret strategy, without realizing you need to embrace complexity. You need to embrace difficulty. You need to embrace probability when you're buying a business, especially if you want to buy more to do a roll-up. And that's what we help people in doing. It's like you need to be aware of the steps that you need to take. We can help you almost solve half of that problem by taking care of part of these steps. But you also need to be aware that you need to take care of these things, either by yourself or with somebody like us. And this is a reality check, because sometimes these pitches get put out that they're like, yeah, you can become a millionaire quick and easy by just buying a business. Very few people actually mention that, you're going to need to pay that money back somehow if you finance it entirely. But that's a whole different subject. The point I'm getting at is, if you want to buy a business, if you got into this game just now, or if you're thinking about rolling up companies and you're a little bit more experienced, realize the fact that it's going to take you longer and cost you more than you think. And making the right decisions early can save you from making painful mistakes down the line, wasting months, if not years, in searching the wrong opportunity, wasting tens of thousands of dollars on the wrong ideas, or even wasting, energy and effort on the deals that are not right. We help people solve for that because we source opportunities either for them, or we help them build a system that sources deals for them. And we basically enable them to work with peace of mind, because after they have that certainty that opportunities are going to come through no matter what, then they can allocate their efforts towards closing the deals instead of finding them. And again, if you're just at the beginning of this journey, consider fixing these initial problems. And also, even if you don't want to fix them with somebody and you want to do it on your own, just be very aware of the challenges that go from the beginning of the rainbow to the end of the rainbow, right? So it's like, there's the pot of gold. Here's the beginning of the rainbow where you're at. You need to walk across the rainbow in order to get a pot of gold. Across the rainbow, there are going to be a ton of challenges, some of which I mentioned in this video. Some of them I only discuss in our private school community, but you need to be aware of those. And we help people address some through our strategies, through our systems that find DealFlow, find your next multi-million-dollar deal almost on autopilot. And if you're interested in that, you can check out what we do in the description. If not, you can still figure out things on your own, but it's going to take you longer, cost you more. And again, independently of the decision you decide to make, just be aware that the promise that's being sold, that it's easy to buy a business with no money down, it's not as true as you may think it is. It is possible, but there are a lot of other steps involved.